Hello, everyone. I am Ben Pick, and thank you for joining me in Running to Write. If this is your first time, if you came to me through Self-Published Andy, thank you for joining us. This is my weekly podcast, and yeah, every week I give questionable writing advice through running metaphors. I know this is the second Monday of the month, so I usually do a productivity sprint where I write a chapter and I work with other people for an hour and a half to try and also write or do whatever they want for that time period. And I pushed that back a week because that way I could fit in this collaboration with Self-Pub with Andy. In fact, I did prepare this, but I messed up for one instance. So I'm going to get Andy's stuff ready to go. So sorry, give me 1 second. Perfect. Because Andy did a lot of the work for this. So there are 3 formatting tools that we are analyzing for tonight. And he did 2 videos of those. Those I actually have ready and prepared and waiting to be copied. But for right now, my collaboration partner is... I cannot... let's see here. This is... There we go. That is Andy's video in case you aren't familiar with his channel. And yeah, I do need a hoodie. It has gotten quite cold today. Yesterday was in the 70s. Today it dropped by a good 10 to 20 degrees. So anyways, like I just hinted at, or next week we're doing the productivity sprint so we can all write together. But tonight I'm talking about formatting tools, which is what I already said. So I've posted 2 different videos about how to format using Reedsy. Welcome to the third. My first one was an all-encompassing guide of how I actually transformed my manuscript into a standard text. It was made much more difficult than it needed to be because I worked with multiple editors who each had tweaked their own formats into the Word document that I was using, and a lot of them didn't play nicely with each other. So the format was incomprehensible and inconsistent, even if the words on the page looked right. There were definitely different formats in the background that were kind of throwing a whole bunch of things off. So and it's a Word document, so you mess with one thing and the entire manuscript gets messed up, and there are exponentially more and more issues with that. So you tweak one little thing, and the 100 pages later, things get kind of skewed off. My point is that Reedsy helped me fix that. And my second video was a look at the new tricks I've learned about using Reedsy after a few years and 3 complete manuscripts. Now, 3 manuscripts might not sound like a whole lot, but each of those manuscripts needed to be reformatted multiple times, both before and after publications. So my experience with Reedsy is much greater than the number 3 may seem. In fact, I kind of switched the tools that I was using. I switched the formatting around. I switched a whole bunch of different things, both before and after publishing, as well as I wanted to normalize a couple of very specific things. So I kind of went through and overhauled the formatting for all 3. Sorry, I pushed out the formatting for each of the 3 books, and I didn't really care too much whether or not they were consistent. They were generally consistent, and to almost anyone, if you're reading them, it wouldn't be a difference, but there were like tiny little differences if you had all 3 ebooks simultaneously up at the same time, which I don't know why you would. And you could see that there are some little spaces, or like the copyright page, it had one enter, it had an extra carriage return in one, it didn't have the other, it didn't have that in another. And so there are some nuances that I wanted to fix and normalize across each of the 3 books in my series. So Reedsy helped me do that, and that helped me get much more familiar with it. So this time around, tonight's episode, I'm collaborating, like I mentioned, with Andy from Self-Pub with Andy as we compare and contrast editing tools. He started off with D2D Formatting, which is Draft to Digital, and that video can be found here, which I already have ready and prepared. This is Andy's D2D formatting video. So that is right now in the chat. I believe it's also in the comments, or no, it wouldn't be in the comments because I posted the description for this first. I will put them in the description after this is over. But for right now, that is you can see it in the chat window, and I will post it in the description once I'm done with tonight's episode. With that being said, he also reviewed Atticus. So the cool thing about drafted digital formatting and Reedsy is that they're both free tools. So obviously there are limitations in that. You know, I happen to really like Reedsy. I'll talk about the price point and all the different functions as this video goes on. But Andy also reviewed Atticus, which I believe has a $150 price associated with it, which if you do 10 manuscripts or more, that easily is not very expensive. In fact, even if you only do 3, $50 pop, the features that you can build into your manuscript are quite incredible. And he goes into that much more in depth in this video. So self-pub with Andy's Atticus video. So yeah, if you get a chance, I strongly recommend checking out self-pub with Andy's videos because they are fantastic. They are very well thought out. He really showcases what Atticus can do to the point where I am kind of considering buying it. And then once again, overhauling all of my books so that they're consistent. I'm not going to use Atticus for the books moving forward without retroactively changing the format for all of the books I've thus far created. And like I keep saying, the functions, the ease of use, and the sheer beauty of using Atticus and the formats that I can create, it can't be overstated. I really like Reedsy as a tool, but I was thoroughly impressed in the customizations Andy showcased. And I'll do what I can to go through in this video to comment where Atticus can do more. Starting off, Atticus has a feature to preview in real time how your book will look. So you can see a sample print or a sample ebook format and choose exactly how you want it to look from the style of the text to little borders around the corner. Reedsy can't exactly do that. There is kind of a preview option at the end, but it's on a sample text, so you don't really see how how our books will look. And so that is extremely powerful, even if it does take up some space on the screen. Now, if you listen to my intro or read the title of this episode, you know that went with my go-to, and I'm going to be primarily comparing it with Reedsy. We start off by importing the same manuscript. So across all 3 of our videos, Andy provided me with a unformatted Word document, which I then imported into Reedsy. And that's what I'm going to use to showcase what it can do, primarily in comparison to other tools, drafted digital formatting and Atticus, which use the same sample file. And since I have no faith in live demos, I've done this quite a few times. And like I said, it is can be disastrous results. So I have a pre-recording, which I'm going to show here, and I'm going to just comment on it as we go through. At the end, I will likely also show a couple of additional things which I thought of since then in a live demo on my own share screen. But for the primary topic of tonight, I'm going to be just playing a video and then commenting on it as we go through. And yeah, there's a few moments within the video where I kind of cut the recording, and that's mostly to prevent you from seeing files on my screen. But for the most part, everything is happening in live real time. So you can see exactly how long it takes to import the files and just general time to use the tool. So everything else is in real time, as I mentioned, and it's not sped up. And let's watch this video. First off, this is the title page. It's a generic upload file that both Andy and I used across all three tools. There's a few things to note and a few details which I know will create issues, and I'll mention them when we get there. This is the title page. Page actually says sample title page. Go. Oh boy. Let me go back to that. So there we go. Page actually says sample title page on it, and having worked with Reedsy, I know that it generates this page automatically. So I already know one step in this experiment will be to delete what's shown on screen. Reedsy will create sort of a full front page. Then there's kind of like this half page that just has all this information there. It's just the title again, the author. And then after that is the copyright page. So sorry, it's a little bit difficult. I'm not going to play around with this too much. So I'll just try and pause and play accordingly. So that way we can not mess around with it too much in terms of timings. And this is exceptionally small. All right. Next up, we have the copyright page. Looks similar just from this visual check of it, and it looks very similar to the verbiage that Reedsy auto generates, but I'll do a specific comparison later. And even if the language is similar, I want to be true to Andy's experiment. So my goal will be to use the exact copyright content put it there, unless that seems clearly wrong. So I can see that there's this 2003 date in there, and I'll change that in the copyright page, and I'll show you exactly how to do it. Next up should be the table of contents. Sweet. Thank you for joining in, Eloise. Oh, yeah. And sorry, Richard, thank you for joining in. Both of you are awesome, and it is late, I know, but I appreciate you being here. All right, perfect. This is the table of contents. It's another page that gets auto-populated and generated by Reedsy without me needing to include anything. And so therefore, I expect to delete this page after I import it. Now, it also mentions this thing called conclusions, which I don't know what that entails, but we'll find out as I scroll through the rest of this document. I want to just give a really quick rundown of the file that we're uploading, and that way you'll see exactly how Reedsy formats certain things and what it might trip over. And we're going to skip ahead to chapter 1, where I can kind of already see an issue, because here are some chapter names, but Reedsy doesn't have the capability to recognize that that is a chapter title right there. So, sorry. So even though there is a table of contents, it's going to actually try and import this chapter heading, heading 1, to the title that's present, meaning that it's basically ignoring any table of contents that's already within the file. And there's a whole bunch of sample text, which is just something to have content present for. Now, I already see one issue in that the table of contents has a different title than the chapter 1 heading. And like I said, Reedsy is just going to end up ignoring what's here. It's going to stick with what's present in the chapter, which you can see right here is chapter 1. So this is what will end up being the chapter title as opposed to what is in the table of contents. And that's a really cool comparison to Atticus, where Atticus kind of can do some smart details, which Andy demonstrated. So there were actually 2 different options of how and what to import as the chapter titles. And I think it was based off of the, it looked like it was based off the table of contents. I was kind of trying to catch as much of it as I could, the video as possible between when work ended and now. So I kind of had to skim a little bit through the content to watch it all. But I think Atticus gives you more control over what you can actually do. And this is chapter 2, which brings up something really interesting. It's difficult to see here, so I kind of have a little bit of future troubleshooting and foresight, which I can demonstrate or talk about now. wherein there was a single carriage return at the start. And that kind of threw up a whole bunch of formatting for Reedsy when it was imported. Specifically, because there was a carriage return, that carriage return had an H1 format, which means that I had to kind of do some manual changes after I imported. And you'll see exactly what I mean. It's a little bit annoying, but it's very easy to fix once you understand what the problem is. Essentially, we had an extra carriage return, which kept the format for the title in a place where I didn't want it to be. And then Reedsy will make the wrong assumption about what I want to happen. But that's all coming up much later in this video. And then chapters 3 through 7, pretty straightforward stuff. More text, more titles. I'm just going to speed right through them. The only thing to note is that the table of contents only included 5 numbered chapters. And since that page will be ignored by Reedsy anyways, we don't really need to worry about any inconsistencies. And sure enough, that mystery was resolved because the chapter that was listed as conclusions is in fact the epilogue. And you'll see that right here. Nope. Right here. Nope. Sorry. Okay, so we have an about the author section. I guess I will back up just a minute. Maybe I'm confusing too many things. So anyways, there was a chapter listed as conclusions, which is actually the epilogue. And I think this might be an issue depending on author preference. So basically, Reedsy will add a number to every chapter in the main book section. And to resolve that for epilogues, they just need to be moved to the back content section. Nothing really difficult, just something I'll have to show manually later on. And then we come to the about the author section. So yeah, right there was the epilogue, sorry. And then this is about the author section. This is also, this and acknowledgements are something that Reedsy auto-generates. So we don't really need to worry too much about this. And this is a page that I will assume that I delete. The problem comes in that the acknowledgement section is in the formatter, so the front matter of the book. And I couldn't find a way to add it to the back section. So I'm probably just going to leave in the acknowledgements and just add a blank page at the end to handle this. And I'll see if we have time for a screen share demo at the end. But that's all the content that's in the manuscript. So let's upload the document. Now I did, like I said, make a cut right here for the video itself to prevent you from seeing files on my computer. I know I'm just very particular about security. So I want to ensure that you all don't see sensitive files on my computer. That's basically what it amounts to. So that's where that cut comes in. And the first thing that we do when we are in the Reedsy tool itself, once we get there, sorry, I'm sort of staying here. I didn't know how exactly, there we go. So I know exactly how long it would take everything to come in. And you can see my current books right there. We got Falling Through, we got Saving the Lost, so the first and third books. We have my fourth book, and this is the D2D draft to digital sample upload. I kind of did it wrong at first. So there is that option right there to create a new book on your bookshelf with that button. I found that it's easier to instead not do that, because if you create the book, it's harder to then import it. So if you have a manuscript that's ready to go, I found it's easier to just directly import it, which I'm about to show how to do, rather than create a book and then try to import the chapters into it. Where is Andy anyways? It's very late for Andy, so he's probably not going to watch this live, but he will, I'm sure, catch it on the replay. And so, yeah, this was kind of the wrong way of doing it. So I back out and undo that mistake. Because once I created the book, I couldn't find a way to import chapters into it, which means I would need to manually copy and paste the chapters from the manuscript into this file, which I didn't want to do. So it's easier for me to just directly import it. And you'll see me going through that process right now. Everything is handled through this bookshelf page in Reedsy. And it's real simple to just import in. I can give it a title, no problem. And I did actually delete that file, but for some reason it was hanging out there still. And you can see me uploading the file right now. And let's go. In less than a minute, our file was uploaded. Hooray for Reedsy. That's really cool. I didn't alter this video, so you can see that it's a very fast process. Bear in mind that the manuscript is small. For my original 100,000 word manuscript of Falling Through, this process took maybe 5 minutes at the most. And again, that version of Falling Through the manuscript was a jumbled array of smashed together formatting. So Reedsy did a lot of work in very little time. And the sample manuscript is already done being imported. As you can see, I paused this, so kind of bouncing back and forth between real time. You can see on the left, it took what it thinks are the chapter names and started to create what will be the table of contents. And it assumed that the title page of our manuscript was chapter 1. That's fine. I can understand the logic behind that automated process. It does make me rethink things like artificial intelligence and the upcoming war with technology, in that AI lacks critical concepts like context, and so it will create a lot of mistakes just like this. Now, next up, I moved on to the auto-generated table of contents. We already see a few issues here. There are more likely problems due to normalization of the sample itself, but we'll take a closer look because you can see that there are just chapter headings with no title underneath there. So it looks like chapter 3, chapter 5, and chapter 7 all had issues. I happen to know what those problems are, and I'll show you how I fix them, but it's just things to be aware of when you are importing. That's not always a straightforward process, especially if there are inconsistencies within the document. Now, without looking at those chapters, I can't immediately determine what the issue is. From the table of contents itself, there are a few options there. There were some radio buttons, but I tend to use the defaults. Reedsy is kind of weak in terms of customizations, but their defaults are already pretty strong, and so I see no reason to really change how it handles things like table of contents. And so looking at what Reedsy thinks is chapter 3, it was in fact the table of contents from the manuscript, which makes chapter 4 really chapter 1, and so on and so forth. Now, let's look at why chapters 4 and 5 are treated differently. For starters, these are H1 headers, so you can see what I have highlighted there. And as far as I can tell, chapter 4 had a carriage return on the first line, so Reedsy interpreted that as an empty chapter title instead of understanding the intended chapter title. And that's how you had these blank chapters in the left panel. It's an easy fix, but again, something to be mindful of when importing our own files. These are the things to look for, and you need to know how to perform manual review of the imported document before publishing. And that's a great step to do, no matter what tool is used, even outside of writing, to do a manual review line by line, because I have no faith in technology and you shouldn't either. So we need to make sure that it's doing and behaving exactly as we think it is, not as we want it to do or want it to be. And Reedsy didn't distinguish sections as it didn't recognize chapter titles, such as the copyright or the about the author section or acknowledgments. This put all those pages as unique chapters that I'll separate out in a moment. And that's easy enough to do. First of all, don't do what I did here by trying to drag it from the left side. There's actually these 6 buttons on 6 dots on the right side, and that allows us to grab a chapter, change the order, move it to a different section. Unfortunately, I can't move the specific pages higher than the templated copyright or table of contents sections. And so you got those, the copyright page in particular. Let's do a comparison. The verbiage is pretty similar. I want a custom copyright on the copyright page, so I manually copy it in to the custom section and will then delete the imported copyright page. Now the verbiage is a little bit different, so I uncheck the standard text and use my own. And you can see me kind of doing all that right now. They were almost identical. I think there might be like a difference of one word, but even so, I want to kind of stay true to Andy's test. So I'm showing you exactly how to write in a custom copyright line instead of using the default that Reedsy has. Again, those defaults are plenty great, and I use them in my own books. I think the copyright section, I also include a detail for my wife's. I include the cover art in there, and then my wife also did the headshot for my author page. So I include those in the book itself. Sorry, there's a lot going on upstairs. Anyways, it looks like, yeah. So the drag and drop can be a little bit clunky, but if you know what you're doing, if you know how to use the tool, just drag it on the right side, and it mostly works pretty well. But again, you need to do that, which isn't the most intuitive thing. You think that if you could grab anywhere within this left panel and just move the chapters around, it's fine, but you need to actually grab it from the 6 dots on the right side. And since the chapter titles don't line up, I'm going to manually copy them and then delete this imported page in preference of what's already in Reedsy as default. Now, I could turn off Reedsy's table of contents and use this, but I don't really like how it looks. So all I'm doing is moving things around, copying the chapter titles from the provided table of contents, and then deleting everything to try and make it as standard as possible. And no, Richard, bad. We do not want to hail our robot overlords. Now, side note, to bring up specific formatting tools, just highlight the text we want to change, and you can see right there, there's that little window that came up. The options aren't very encompassing, but there are the basics, and I'll do a quick run through of what's available in a minute. And you can see right here, I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the H1 heading, and so I need to just change that back to, I need to highlight the text, change it from H1 to paragraph, and that will solve the problem of the chapters, the extra added chapters in the left panel. So chapter 2, like I mentioned, had a character turn at the start, and I could see that looked odd, but it took me a minute to identify the problem. And I only did that by really quickly going between chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 1, chapter 2, and I could see that there was a carriage return right there. And that's why it looks off. And I'm bouncing through the different chapters to verify exactly how extensive the issue is and to figure out what looks best visually. I have to just remove that carriage return, the extra space. Problem is that it still had the H1 format, as you can see right there. So I had to highlight the text and eventually made the right choice to change it to paragraph. So I'm kind of messing around with the different H1 options. So you have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. All of those would kind of leave the text bold, but instead I wanted to set it to the paragraph, which is the leftmost option, and that returns it to the normal sample text. And I know that's a lot that I kind of threw at you, but I promise you it is more intuitive than it looks if you get in and just try experimenting around with Reedsy. So I also demo how to create a chapter really quick here. And using the button at the top left, we can insert new chapters. We can then also delete them using the trash icon. All pretty straightforward stuff. Now, chapter 2 also had the character turn error. And when I copy and pasted the title, I accidentally left the H1 header in there. So therefore, when I deleted the line, it shifted the text up to the H1 format. And you can see me kind of messing around with all these details as I keep going through. It's always easy enough to fix, but you need to be aware of the problem when it comes in. And I think Andy didn't have this problem when he imported this into Atticus. So this is probably some special detail with Reedsy itself and how it tries to automatically format certain things. So yeah, you can see right there that I took that heading and that will become the chapter title, which I'm about to copy and paste. But first I need to fix this issue with the H1 titles, the header 1 titles. Sorry, I keep saying H1, but that's just the shorthand for it. And so now that I have that fixed, I'm going to just copy and paste the title in there. And once that's done, I'm having a couple of problems. I'm having a couple of problems with copying and pasting and changing the title in terms of exactly where to click. But now I did that change. You can see that's updated in the panel and in the table of contents for the chapter title. So all that to say that because the manuscript wasn't normalized very well, I had to do a couple of customized changes after I imported it. I don't think I had to do quite so much. Funnily enough, I didn't have to do quite so much customization with the formats when I imported my massive 39 chapter, 100,000 word manuscript into Reedsy. But this is a really great demo of the issues you may come across in uploading your manuscript. So it's really good thing that I have it here for these demo purposes. And we are moving on to the, what did I just do? Sorry. I lost my place. We're moving on to the about the author page. And this is something that Reedsy auto generates anyways. So it's actually goes in the back matter and it is very easy to handle. And because I wanted to stay true to the nature of this test, I copy and pasted what's already there and just added it to the default About Me section. Oh, hey, Mark Bernard, thank you for joining in and checking out formatting things. The cool thing is that, well, I don't know, it's actually not that cool, but it's useful in that you have an icon for where you can upload pictures. And this I use in my books to generate a picture myself. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead to the acknowledgement section. But for the About Me, I copied the content into the template, and I like the template because it has social media links that are very easy to display within the ebook format. Obviously, within a printed book, you can't link things. I mean, you can still see that, my Instagram, Facebook, whatever, the URLs, but obviously you can't click them in a paperback book as you can in a ebook, where it easily just takes you to the pages they intend. And this is the template acknowledgments, but that belongs in the front section. And I can't move it to the back section. So you can see the front section is up here in the top left, and the back section is down here. So I wanted it at the end because that's how I like doing my acknowledgments, which means that I move this section from the main body into the back section. And then I can turn off the templated section in the front by just clicking the edit button. And you'll see me going through all those steps. Now, the one thing that I noted, I commented that the About Me section has an image to upload. Well, it doesn't let you upload images in the front or back sections, with the one exception in the About Me section. So that's just something to be aware of. I tried a bunch of different ways because at first I wanted to do a custom About Me section, but I couldn't import a picture. And so I just gave up on that and used their templated instance of the About the Author page in the back matter section. There's also options to do a forward, a dedication, and a preface that you can toggle on and off depending on what content you want in your books. I tend to just leave those off. I think I have in my books, I have the initial title page, the table of contents, a dedication page, and that's it. So now I'm updating all those manual chapter titles, and it's a bit of a pain, but it kind of makes sense when you think about it, because the oh, sorry, let me stop this for a second, or pause it for a second. The chapter titles, it can't import directly from the table of contents, but the chapter titles that were in each of the chapters were wrong when compared to what was in the table of contents in the original uploaded file. So I wanted to try and normalize this as best I could and show how you can copy and paste from your table of contents into the actual book, and then that will automatically populate the Reedsy's table of contents. And then I ended up deleting the now wrong table of contents from the manuscript that I uploaded. That's a lot to say. So yeah, hopefully I didn't lose any of you there. Now, changing the title, that's what I'm trying to do right here. And that took a little bit more time for me to remember exactly how to do it. you can't actually do it in here. You have to back out to the bookshelf page, and then it's really easy to handle. And you'll see me doing that right now. But before I do that, I wanted to demo the various formats because I wanted to try and keep things. Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out the page that I need to go to change the title page. I guess wrong a few times, so you can see what other functions are available within Reedsy. But this is the demo of the various formats before I back out to the bookshelf tab. And so you have bold, italics, underline, strike through, superscript, subscript, etc. You can have hyperlinks, which obviously is only relevant for ebooks as opposed to print copies, as I mentioned before. And Reedsy will allow us to make comments. These are to ourselves and don't show up in the rest of the printed text. I have a whole bunch of notes to myself, and those are very, very helpful when I'm editing my manuscripts. It also seems like Reedsy pared down its features to only be the most useful. And even these I barely touched, as my books don't need fancy formatting. There is an occasional bold or italics moment, but that's mostly for instances of telepathy or extreme sound effects. Other than that, I let the text do the talking for me. And there's a spell check, which is, fairly good. Between that and Pro Writing Aid, there's, I catch most of the issues. But obviously, there's a lot of mistakes in terms of diction or words that are spelled the same but have different meanings, or there's a lot of mistakes that neither tool picked up. And so again, we still need to manually review and not rely too heavily on any of the automated spell checks. And one of the things that really caught me was that there was a period in the wrong place, and none of these tools caught it. I think I actually printed a few books with the period in the wrong place, so I took it out, and there was some normalized, I think I might have actually undid a change when I was messing with the revisions. So long story short, on day one with publishing one of my books, there was an extra period when there shouldn't have been. And so I had to go back and make that change. That was a fun day. Anyways, in case we made a mistake in the manuscript, like I mentioned, Reedsy keeps a history. So ideally, we don't mess with this. As I just mentioned, that is a path to insanity. It's nice to have, and I certainly do like having a history that I can go back to and change around. But there are bad versioning checks. Like I said, I fixed a mistake. I know I fixed a mistake. But when I was messing around with different versions, or maybe I think I hit Control Z, which undid the fix that I made when I was trying to do Control C, or maybe I fixed it correctly, and then I made some other change, which I tried to go back on, and something got messed up. Point is that if we try and look through the different versions and do all these comparisons, it's very easy to go crazy. And so that's why I tried to not do that and to only use the, quote unquote, good version. Only use the most recent version, not try and go back to different things. There's also find and replace, which is the most common tool that I used. Oh, sorry, I'm jumping around to the next step. Find and replace is by far the most common tool I use. It's on the right side panel, and I did a lot of sanity checks, as I mentioned. Once I recognized that there was that extra period, I did a lot of string searches for multiple instances of multiple periods in a row, and various other checks of certain spellings that I knew I made mistakes on, or certain specific instances of mistakes. And so that helped me normalize my diction and catch specific errors that I knew what to look for. And one last thing I wanted to mention, which I did demo, but I think I went through it too quickly, is that we can also include footers. And those go at the end of each of the chapters. So you can create footers, the end of each page, bottom of each page. You can create footers for various additional pieces of information. I didn't use that tool. I didn't use that function, but it is an option that's available to you. And so it's really cool to have. If you're doing, I don't know, a fantasy story and you want to have some kind of little, hey, somebody used some specific Elvish phrase, and that's what this Elvish phrase means. Or if you're doing nonfiction and you want to include some reference, that's how you would do it. It's all pretty straightforward in terms of insertions within Reedsy. But now it's time to fix that title. So on the bookshelf, we select the Manage button, and it's easy enough. So look at that. change from D2D sample to Sands of Deception. And after I refresh, this title is now Sands of Deception, and we are good to go. With that out of the way, I delete the import title page, do one last consistency validation for the chapter's conformity, and then we're ready to export the book. Now I want to demo a few features first. Like I said, we can import images. They need to be standard JPEG, PNG, etc., your standard image files. And the quality of pictures and print, it looks okay. So this is me kind of normalizing through to make sure that there's no carriage return when I'm not expecting it. All those chapter names are on the same line. All the first line after the chapter title is all on the same line. So that looks great. And this is me importing a book, or sorry, importing an image. Nothing fantastic, but it does print in black and white. So that's one thing to note. Or at least I was using black and white features. So maybe if you export it out as a PDF and then you intentionally print a color image, then this will look much better. But for if you're printing an elaborate work of art or some complex map, I don't know exactly how well this performs or how well this exports. And here I am including various other features. So those are the section breaks. And I tend to manually add in a carriage return before and after just because I like how it looks, as opposed to having it brush up against the line before it. So either way, that was Rufus. That was my dog. And the black and white instance, which is my About Me page, looks okay. I don't need to do anything fantastic. I mean, I don't really need a very well done picture of myself, including my book. So black and white works perfectly fine. And here we have different options within exporting our page. You can do the ebook, the EPUB, or you can do a PDF. I like to apply drop caps, and there are different size formats that we can handle. Mine is the regular digest. It's 8.5 by 5.5. And you can see that all being shown there. In terms of formatting, there are really only 3 options for the text itself. I tend to choose the middle option. I think the classic looks the best. Okay, that sounds great. Sorry, my episode is going very long. There's a lot to go through. I want to do a full comparison for Reedsy, and so I want to do it full justice, and that's how we end up here. So I think the Reedsy format, that's the one over here on the left, looks pretty good, but I prefer this classic look, so that's what I always pick for my books. The annoying thing is that by default, it goes back to, yeah, and that one is just way too over the top for me, so I don't like the romance one. Which right now, even though it looks like I'm selecting 2, I'm actually selecting 3. That looks very over the top for me, and so I don't necessarily like it. Now, one thing to note is that when you are refreshing the page, or if you're trying to export, or if you do something, it often defaults back to the regular default. So that's option number 1 here, or the smallest size book. And so just the thing to note is that, sorry, I'm a little bit sick today, so I'm trying to, trying to do this while also not coughing everywhere. And I will do my best to hurry through this. Yeah, so all the defaults go back to all the way on the left, which is this Reedsy image, which means that when I have exported multiple books in a row, I frequently end up with the wrong format. No, Richard. Luckily, Richard did not get sick. And you can see how long it takes to export it. Very quick. And we are done. It should take almost a minute to go through. And while we're there, I heard you, sweet. Oh, no, it's fine. Don't. Oh, thank you. My lovely wife just brought me a glass of water because she hears me struggling. Thank you so much. Love you too. Yeah. Spoiler alert, I have COVID. So that is making things a little bit rough today for the past couple of days. And I just want to make a note because in my previous video, somebody asked me about page breaks, and I couldn't find out how to do this exactly in Reedsy. So the functionality may be there, but I don't know how to do it. And one possibility would be to add a blank page. except that throws off the entire table of contents, as you saw when I had blank chapters in there. So I don't recommend using that strategy. I did this in the forward and after sections for my book because I wanted the story to start on the right side of the page, and my lengthy table of contents shifted things. So I was able to add in those blank pages in the forward and after sections because those don't count within the table of contents. But that was my custom solution, and it only worked because pages in the forward formatter and after content don't count for table of contents. So in a few specific cases, I was also able to add carriage returns to manually push things to another page. So if there was just like a hanging line or hanging word, I could press enter and give it a full paragraph. Or I cut content so that a single sentence wouldn't get pushed to the next page. I think in my first book, one of the last lines was on an entirely new page, which looked weird. So I trimmed down that last chapter to prevent that issue. And that's one of Reedsy's limitations, but it can be manually worked around if you manually look through the book and see where those issues come up. Atticus actually has the cool ability to fix this. That's via the Windows and Orphans buttons. I didn't test this to determine how well it works, but having that option means that it is likely to, at least to some degree, work well. And in Andy's video, he showcased this. So now you'll see that the export is almost ready to go. And this is all easy enough-ish to import everything, so long as you know what you're doing and remember to check every time. The defaults do get reset. So if I move back to the previous page, I'll lose my progress. And like I said, I like having the second formatting option, but it will default back to Reedsy and it'll default back to a different size book than I want. So it's not a big deal, but it's annoying when I export the wrong book, the wrong size, and then need to catch that mistake, hopefully, before I publish my book. And luckily, the naming conventions from the files that are generated give away the size of the title. So if I'm paying attention in any type of way across multiple steps, it's very easy enough to catch. So in summary, I'm judging Reedsy based on 5 different metrics: time, accuracy, technique, cost, and learning. So for time, how long did it take me to import the Word document manuscript? Oh, and you can see in the background that I'm sort of going through the PDF, showcasing how it looks, showcasing the visual details of it. And so you can kind of get a good view for how the PDF will look. Now, in terms of time, again, negligible. For a larger manuscript, this was noticeable, but still not inconvenience, especially given the formatting needed to normalize my 100,000 word manuscript. Even exporting a large manuscript, it takes only 5 minutes. So that's a great job, Reedsy. 5 out of 5. Time is negligible. Now it's true for all these other tools that were demoed. Drafted Digital Formatting and Atticus are very quick in terms of importing and exporting the files. So this is just how things look in the table of contents. There's, sorry, let me go back to that because I did want to mention one thing really quickly. There were the chapter titles have the words chapter 1 in them, as well as the 1. The 1 is auto-generated. Chapter 1 was included from the copied instances. So my solution would be to delete the chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, etc. And so that's easy enough to do. I can't do that here. I need to actually do that as I show you in the individual chapters. So I can't change the titles on the table of contents page, but those are easy enough to handle. And I show the different formatting options here. So in order to take out that chapter 1 issue, I need to go to the actual chapter and then just remove the title manually, which is what I do. Cool. So now that that's out of the way, you can just see me sort of looking through the generated PDF. Now, next up, accuracy. Were there mistakes in the importing process? Yeah, there were some, but they were understandable. The chapter titles weren't what I'd like, but more specifically, the automatic H1 heading 1 headers that I needed to manually change. It was a bit of a pain. Overall, that's good. There were some manual changes needed, but this is understandable. So I'd say 4 out of 5. I like a way for the table of contents to be imported, but I don't know how that tool should behave, especially if there are contradictions like in this example. So I wouldn't count that nice to have feature against Reedsy for not being present. That being said, I think that that function is present in Atticus. So that's some good benefits for Atticus. And of course, there's Rufus right there. So lovely, lovely dog. Now, technique. What can I add to the manuscript? There's limiting formatting, but that's good for my books, and that might not suit your needs. I never came across a severe issue, but plenty of people who comment on my video hit Reedsy's limitations very hard. I don't know if that's a deal breaker for them or you, but it's something to note. So I'll give the technique a 3 out of 5. It works for me, but I'm not everyone, and my books have very relatively simple formatting. So there's some limitations which I don't like, such as the inability to include images outside of the main body content. I wanted to have my own custom. Oh, right. I know what the problem was. So within the About Me section, I wanted to have the image showing my face, but I also wanted to have a QR code that's easy enough to scan, because I could include certain details within the ebook, but it's very hard to do in the printed copy unless you use a QR code. And I was trying to include that QR code, which couldn't work in the back matter because you can't include images in back matter. So that was a technical issue that I couldn't overcome. And I ultimately just removed the QR code. So 3 out of 5. Overall, I don't run across the limitations of Reedsy often, but when I do, yeah, they're there. Next up is cost. Free, 5 out of 5. Enough said when it's hard to argue with cost of 0. And lastly, we have learning. So most of these features were intuitive for me. I made some mistakes, but most of those were due to my own carelessness. There are a few things, like we mentioned, when grabbing the chapters, you need to grab from the 6 dots as opposed to the panel itself. But I'll still stick with a 4 out of 5 for me, knowing that this will vary wildly by users. Sometimes I fail when trying to bring up the formatting menu, so this could be as low as 2 for other people. And all in all, Reedsy is a limited tool, but it's kind of like guardrails, I think. So it keeps us on the road, but it doesn't let us go on a crazy adventure. Now it's free, it's easy to use, and I can't add a lot to make the customizations that I would necessarily want to, that would be over the top. But, you know, with those limitations, it perfectly suits my needs for my books. And so it formatted a mess of a manuscript without too many issues. So that goes very well in its favor. Now, comparing this to Draft to Digital based on the video that Andy showed, I would say that Draft to Digital is likewise easy. I found it less intuitive than Reedsy. I didn't like how it's set up visually. I've used it before, so I'm kind of drawing on that memory as well. But that's, again, a personal preference. They have numerous templates that we can use, and that's format. And it also has the option to set different formatting based on genres. So here there were only 3 within Reedsy. There were only 3 options for the text formats. Within Draft to Digital formatting, there were a lot more options, and we could customize based on specific genres. So if I'm in science fiction, I can give the format, the chapter titles, the section breaks, the borders, a more futuristic look, which could make my book pop a little bit more. I didn't really care too much about those features, so it gives the books more customization. But again, I still kind of prefer Reedsy to the look and feel of Reedsy and using it. Now that brings us to Atticus, which is incredibly robust. It's incredibly easy to use, and it's got a price tag of $150, I think. As far as I'm aware, at the time of recording this, $150 for a lifetime license. That's not bad when spread across multiple manuscripts. We can do a lot. Like I said, it is really robust. I really like its preview feature, so you can see exactly how your manuscript looks, not only as an ebook, but as a paperback or under different formats. You can see what it looks like in a tablet versus an e-reader. And so that really lets you see how the readers will experience your book. There's also some very cool customizations that you can do. And if those aren't good enough, if the templates aren't good enough for you, you can make your own template, which I found incredibly useful. So you have a lot more choices, you have a lot more nuance, and you can do a lot more with Atticus. And I actually commented on Andy's video that I might at some point switch over to Atticus. The real, $150, that's not a deal breaker for me. The deal breaker, the current hold off for me is that I would need to normalize. I would need to go back and normalize all my books in a new tool. And I feel like that could lead to some issues, or that would be more time intensive. So those are my thoughts on Reedsy and how it compares to Atticus or drafted digital formatting. I'm Ben Pick. Thank you for joining me in Writing to Write. If this is your first time here, I promise I do not do hour-long videos. They are usually much, much shorter. I try to keep it to 10 minutes, usually go to 20 when I start rambling. But I hope if this is your first time here that you like and subscribe. If you're a regular viewer, please also like, share, do whatever. And that brings me up to post in those comments. Let me know what tools you use for editing. Have you switched or experimented with multiple? And if so, which do you prefer? If you're new here, again, please show your support by hitting that like button, and also be sure to sign up for my monthly newsletter. So coming up in my next newsletter, which comes out on the 3rd of every month, so we just kind of passed mine, but the next one's coming out, and that will include sharing my international AuthorTuber vacation. My wife and I went to London, and we got to meet some of you out there in person. It was awesome. Richard Holiday is a wonderful, wonderful human being, and so we got to hang out with him. You'll get to see some of our adventures, our misadventures across London, and all the fun details that entails. Now, by the time that this newsletter comes out, or in fact, by the time this video comes out, there's a few more people who know what I look like aside from this little foot by 2 feet box. So it's nice for people to see what I look like from just beyond the shoulders up. And with that in mind, see you next time. Until then, let's format our amazing manuscripts. And I hope to see you next Monday, a week from today at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So it's starting an hour earlier for my productivity sprints, which usually last for about an hour and a half, 3 different cycles of half an hour and then 25-minute sprints or 20-minute sprints. So let's form our amazing novels. And I hope to see you next week starting at 6 p.m. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful night.